We have Dr. Bruno Wasser, architect, city planner, and researcher for the Second World War from Cologne, Germany. He's going to be talking about the master plan for the East. And this plan was how to handle Poles and Jews in regards to their policy. Dr. Wasser.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You have heard I come from Germany, therefore my English is not so well, and I beg your pardon for this. I speak about Generalplan East, the master plan for the East. Himmler's attempt, thank you. Himmler's attempt to Germanize Eastern Europe during the Second World War. The 18th anniversary of the outbreak of the Second World War gives an opportunity to raise public awareness of the immense dimension of human suffering of civilian population inflicted by it. Already in 1927, the future Führer Adolf Hitler stated in his book Mein Kampf, "We start where we ended 6 centuries ago. We stop the eternal German drive to the south and west of Europe, and we set our sights on the countries in the east." The Reichsführer from the Security Squadron, SS Heinrich Himmler, titled in May 1940, "Some Thoughts on the Treatment of the People of Alien Race in the East." The memorandum states, "For the non-German population of the East, there should be no higher school than the 4th grade elementary school. This population will be at Germany's disposal as leaderless workers, people, and annually it will provide Germany with migrant workers and workers for special projects, roads, quarries, buildings. That means extermination through work." Immediately after the end of the so-called Poland campaign, Hitler appointed Heinrich Himmler on October 7, 1939, as a Reich Commissioner of the Consolidation of German Nationhood, or better, strengthening of Germandom. His task encompassed the following: first, repatriation of the ethnic Germans from abroad; second, the elimination of the harmful influence of the alien race population; and third, the resettlement measures for the design of new settlement areas. Just to see these territories. And the next, please. The furthest occupation. As the highest goal of the German Ostpolitik, Himmler declared the decomposition of the invaded Polish Second Republic in as many parts and splinters as possible. Thus, the Polish people ought to be isolated from the Ukrainians, Jews, Masurians, Gorals, Lems, and Kashubians. The racially valuable children were to be kidnapped into the Reich and to be Germanized. Yesterday we have heard about it. In September 1939, behind the Wehrmachtsline, 5 Einsatzgruppen, special task forces of the SS, were operating, liquidating the Polish upper classes, according to Prepare Hits list: nobles, clergy, intellectuals, Jews. Those Einsatzgruppen acted under Hitler's command. What we have now localized as a leadership of Poland is to be liquidated. What will re-emerge is to be detected by us and to be removed in an appropriate period of time. 10,000 Poles became victims of executions and ethnic cleansing during the first weeks of occupation. At the same time, the approximately 550,000 Jews from the Polish-occupied territories were expelled to the Generalgouvernement for the occupied Polish region in order to be ghettoized there. The planned extension. The legal framework for the suppression of the Polish, Czech, and Russians was the so-called Master Settle Plan for the East. It was commissioned by Himmler in mid-41 in the Group 3B of the Reich Main Security Office, the key office for the extermination measures. It was designed even before the notorious Wannsee Conference. The author of the plan was Konrad Meyer-Hettling, professor at the University of Berlin. His master plan for the East provided for the gradual umvolkung through restoration to the race, forced change of the population's ethnic composition, reaching out to the URL, planned eviction of more than 31 million alien race nationals, and complete decomposition of the resident population, expulsion of the incapacitated, especially the children, annihilation of racially undesirable, and mass deportation of the civilian populace into forced labor to the German Reich. The entirety of residents ought to be rated and subjected to a racial national classification. The SS planners foresaw the new German settlement area up to the line Leningrad, St. Petersburg, Lake Ludaga, Bryansk, Gothenburg, Crimea Sea of Azov, whereas 31 million residents ought to be relocated and another 14 millions had to be Germanized under this SS plan after the Endsieg. The General Government for the occupied Polish region and the Baltic states were to be completely initially decomposed, in German umgefolgt. Dr. Erhard Wetzel, who was to check the projected statistics of the Generalplan Ost on behalf of Himmler, even came to a figure of up to 50 million of non-Germanic race members to be expelled. This is a plan application by the SS Construction Agency to build the camp of Majdanek. In the western part of the Soviet Union, which was already considered defeated in mid-42, Meyer-Hettling planned 3 settlement marches, Ingermanland, Leningrad, Gothenburg, Crimea, and Memel-Nerev, which were to be totally Germanized, with its security guaranteed by the so-called SS bases. The next, please. This plan included the enslavement and starvation of millions of people, as well as the extermination of the Jewish population of the planned areas. That's a bisschen früh. Simultaneously, an equally radical extermination policy was already underway on other fronts. Between June 41 and May 44, 3.3 million Russian prisoners of war died in German camps of starvation and undersupply. In addition to about 6 million Jews, just as many Poles lost their lives, 20% of the population of 39. The totalitarian despots who planned to create a new living space in German, Lebensraum, in the East, understood so-called central places theory Perversely, the primary objective was not a supply of space itself, but rather its permanent domination. In the planned grid of dominant cities in the east, however, the National Socialist spatial planners did not include the Polish capital of Warsaw. Next, please. After extensive destruction of the metropolis by German bombardments, at the beginning of the war, the German civil administration created a plan which provided not for its reconstruction, but a systematic diminution. The so-called PACTS plan was already created in December 1939 by the Würzburg architectural group that drafted a new German city of Warsaw. Under this plan, Warsaw ought to be reduced from a city with formerly 1.3 million inhabitants to the level of a small town with about 40,000 residents. According to the PACTS plan, 85% of Warsaw historic buildings ought to be destroyed. As a result of the Jewish, that's a picture from the SS General Stroop after the Jewish uprising. As a result of the Jewish uprising in the Warsaw ghetto in 1943, thousands of fighters were killed, and the Warsaw uprising of the Polish Home Army, Armia Krajowa, a year later, with more than 120,000 victims, murdered the desired reduction of Poland's capital city. Warsaw was achieved. According to the SS leader, Reinhard Heinrich, after whom the final solution, Aktion Reinhard, was named, it was necessary to destroy a total of 10 million Jews. The mass gassings of the Jews began at the order of the Führer in December 1941 in Chelmno, followed by Belzec, Sobibor, Treblinka, Majdanek, and Auschwitz-Birkenau. In the new German Reichsgaue, administrative subdivisions created in number of areas annexed by Nazi Germany between 1938 and 1945, the Eindeutschung, Germination, ought to be achieved by the assimilation of what was perceived as floating ethnic groups, as Kashubians, Masurians, and the mixed population. According to the same logic, a poorly Polish population was to be driven out. German settlement in the east before the war. Furthermore, the ethnic consolidation of Arabic land ought to be accomplished by the settlement of ethnic Germans from the Soviet hemisphere. 120,000 Baltic Germans, 136,000 Volksdeutsche, ethnic Germans from eastern Poland, 200,000 from Romania, and further more from Yugoslavia and Slovakia. However, Heinrich Himmler, the commissioner for the consolidation of German nationhood, thought a couple of steps ahead. Hence, the settlement of the further living space in the east war commenced on June 21, 1941, after the attack at the Soviet Union in eastern Poland in the district of Lublin of the General Government. Right there, an area of small Renaissance town, Zamość, the so-called Zamośćczyzna, was chosen as a site of the experimental phase of the master plan for the East. Zamość should named Heinrich Himmler Stadt. As a model settlement site, Zamośćczyzna was supposed to serve as a bridging link of Germany from the Baltic states to Transylvania. For the SS planners, the different factors had to be taken into account, such as a high Jewish population share, the existing of mixed settlements of Poles and Ukrainians, and the head of the SS and police in Lublin, Odilo Globocnik. In his office All the strings of command and activities of Aktion Reinhard, the extermination of the Jews, came together. The district's capital, Lublin, was located on the important crossroad for the entire transport and supply traffic of the SS to the east. As a result, Lublin became the main stronghold in the network of SS bases in the east. It was planned to serve as a rear garrison and central magazine for the SS troops. The depopulated villages, you can see. The formal basis for the establishment of Zamość as a first settlement area in the General Government provided the General Order of the Reichsführer SS dated on November 42. For this purpose, the entire population of the area was sorted and classified into 4 entrant categories. Entrant category 1 of German descent, 2nd intended for germination, Eindeutschung, 3rd only relevant for employment, and 4th intended for the Auschwitz labor camp. The first big resettlement action in the Zamość took place from November 27 until Christmas 42 and affected about 10,000 people from 60 villages. 7,000 of those inhabitants were transferred to the Zamość transit camp, and 910 people were forced to the Auschwitz concentration camp. In Berlin, the expelled persons assigned to work in the Old Reich were exchanged for youth employed there in the armament industry. This first action was part of the so-called resettlement extermination model, which lasted until mid-43 and encompassed a total of 41,000 Poles in 160 villages. Typically, the resettlement action began at sunrise and were carried out under enormous time pressure. That resettlement terror gave the beginning of a massive fugitive movement that encompassed tens of thousands of people. Thus, during the major SS and police operations from June to August 43, Werwolf 1 and 2, only about 50% of the target inhabitants were captured, 16,000 sent to the Majdanek concentration camp. In total, 112,000 Poles from Zamość were sent into forced labor in the Third Reich, and 108,000 were driven by the SS out of the Harden home. In view of that fact, the Polish historian Czesław Madajczyk called the Zamość a special laboratory for the SS, Sonderlaboratorium SS. The hunt of manpower for the Reich and for the war industry greatly increased the activity of Polish resistance groups and made the Lublin district the most active partisan area in Poland. As a countermeasure, a number of Polish villages in the area were set on fire and the remains of the buildings destroyed with explosives, suffering the same fate as the Czech town of Lidice or the French town of Oradour. These special circumstances, also the extent of the achieved Umvolkung, ethnic decomposition, and its exemplary character as a first large settlement area in the Generalgouvernement by the Reichskommissioner, justified the assessment of the area as a special policy experimental model and first stage of implementation of the Generalplan Ost. It must be surprising that in case 8 of the Nuremberg war crimes trials against the Reich main security office of the SS, an implementation of the master plan of the East was negated, and furthermore, it was enunciated that no attempt has been made to carry out the recommendation contained therein. In summary of these facts, one can only speak of a gross misjudgment of the International Military Tribunal. I thank you.